What is up, fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with a pre-intro before we hop into the second part of this mailbag to let you know that this is part two of what's going to be a three-part mailbag because we had so many questions this week. Before we get started, the usual reminders to continue subscribing to us wherever you get us. If you're on YouTube, hit that sub button, like, comment, help the algorithm love us back, help us continue to grow this community. Also, subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify if you're checking us out for the first time on the interwebs, Stitcher, Google, wherever you get your podcast. We are there. We appreciate permanent subscriptions. Throw us the cross subs, be on YouTube plus a podcast player. And if you've done both of those things, consider shouting us out. Word of mouth recommendations to people who you know that are looking for an NBA podcast. Follow us on the socials. All the links to our TikTok and handles to our TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter in the podcast and YouTube description. They're also basically just at HardwoodKnocks. Instagram is at Hardwood_Knocks. Though, and join the Discord. We have Grant in there. The link to that is in the YouTube and podcast description as well. Last, but certainly not least, I want to thank everyone who's been tagging us in their Spotify Wraps or letting us know how long they've listened to us for this past year. It genuinely does mean the world. And I try and be transparent about that. And I say it so much that it's probably a cliche on this podcast, but just given how close we were to shuttering things over the offseason, it means a lot that there's still that we have what feels like a very loyal community, even though it's not the biggest, and we are continuously trying to grow it. And I did just want to say something because I guess it's like we're approaching the end of the year now that we're in December. So it's a time for reflection. And I want to make it clear that I never want to stop being grateful for our listeners, for our Discord members, the people who help us really, dictate and direct where the content is going, because we want to put stuff out there that you like, even if you're not necessarily agreeing with everything we say. And Discord's been fun. I do see more people active in there, independent of me actually saying something, which is really, really cool. I do try and respond as much as possible. And it really does mean a lot whenever people are tagging us or shouting us out on Twitter, where I've gotten DMs saying that our podcast was recommended by someone. Like, that's just super cool. And the mailbag questions are super appreciated as well. And it's like I've said before, and it's on behalf of Grant. Like, we just don't do this at this point. Again, it's just the interest of full transparency. We know what's going on with advertising revenue. It's just been slashed. This podcast has never been. This is probably the least profitable stretch that the podcast has been for me personally. And I've been doing this for 7 years. It's luckily I'm not in a position where I need the podcast to do anything, but it's very much a passion project, and it's the listeners, the Discord members, the people who interact with us and actually have discussions with us or are consuming our content that really drive me to keep going. And, I recognize that this podcast isn't perfect. It has things that we need to improve upon. I would love to, extend our reach, of course. I do feel like, to point out a flaw that I probably have my hands in just too many things at the moment. Trying to, run a TikTok and Instagram where I don't necessarily even see the benefit of those necessarily. And like the YouTube channel is sort of stagnated to where we're not getting hundreds of new subscribers every month. And so I might need to centralize the focus. It's things that are constantly shifting, but there are moments, there are days, there are weeks where I don't understand why I am doing this, why we're doing this at all. And it feels like a waste of time. But then every so often, there'll just be moments where it's, listeners saying something, tagging us on Twitter, shouting us out on Twitter, getting a Discord message, or just remembering how fun it is to interact with all the people that listen. That does keep me going. And that's not to go, woe is me. That's just to reiterate, which I will continue to do, because I do think it's something that podcasts could do a better job of how grateful I am for the community for giving us a reason to keep going. And again, for being so nice and for continuing to listen to us, especially longtime listeners as well. With that long ass ramble out of the way, though, let's get to part two of this 3-part mailbag. Grant was here for the first 2 parts. We did I don't know, 90 plus minutes of a mailbag together. So we split up into 2, and I have a solo one coming out for part 3, since we just had so many great questions. Let's hop right into it. This next question comes from Demos Quol, and he asks, is this Kyrie, is Kyrie, can getting rid of Kyrie be addition by subtraction for the Nets? Is essentially the question. This was posed during Kyrie's suspension from the team. I still think it's a fair question either way. The Nets are 4-2 since Kyrie came back, but I think this question matters because Kyrie Irving is probably not going to be a member of the Nets next year. That's just the expectation. So just where do you land on this?
Well, I mean, just off, if we, on the court, I'm open to the idea that, I mean, he's been the second best player on a championship team and was the second best player on a team that, if not for the Warriors, could have won 3 or 4. So like, and he's not that guy, but he's close enough to where if you have Kevin Durant as your number 1, Kyrie is your number 2, you have decent role players. This is nothing new. Brooklyn has had and has the talent to be really dangerous. I just wouldn't want him in my locker room as a voice that it just wouldn't want him around. So the addition by subtraction idea is pretty clear to me. I just wouldn't want him on my team, full stop. But as far as the Nets playing better, I think it's just it's the less like sexy answer, but it's just a combination of stuff. Like, Ben Simmons has been a lot better. Seth Curry's back and making everything, from 3. You get Joe Harris looking a little better. Durant's been on a heater. It's not just Kyrie not being there, but if the question is, would the Nets be better without him? Like, in every sense, except for, yeah, he might get you 30 and win you a few games, and maybe win a playoff series. I don't know. Like, yeah, I think so. I mean, it's just for the overall organizational health and just for sort of making it a more manageable, easy to run, potentially just as successful franchise. Like, yeah, I'd be good with no Kyrie on the Nets.
I think he can complicate the Ben Simmons fit at points, and before Ben Simmons' injury, he did look a lot better. I don't know if it would necessarily be addition by subtraction. Like, I would want to get value for Kyrie Irving, but like just the general vibes around that team were better when he wasn't there. He's a fantastic basketball player, but when you have Durant and Patty Mills and Joe Harris and Seth Curry, I don't know. Like, yeah, I guess Kyrie's like the other guy in the half court that you would trust to go out and get a bucket before Seth and Joe Harris and all that. So I don't think it's from a basketball perspective, I don't think it's just addition by subtraction if you get rid of Kyrie. And also, if Kyrie leaves, like, is Kevin Durant long for Brooklyn at that point is the other element of that question.
Yeah. Well, that was easy. Let's move on to the next one. This is from Glad. What is one rule change you think will happen after this year, and what is something you want to change? Bonus question. Any thoughts on what feels like an emphasis on calling more travels? And I'm throwing in more carries because I've watched Jordan Poole.
So I think they're going to change, and they should have, the clock killing gimmick, where we've seen the Grizzlies, and the Grizzlies I knew did it. Like, the Celtics were just like, I guess I wasn't watching like intuitively enough with them. Letting the ball roll so that time comes off the clock, but not the shot clock, that just needs to change. Yeah. I think they need to change. I think they will change that. We kind of saw that when the take foul was becoming, I guess that was a longer standing issue, or at least one that was noticed for longer. A rule change that I think should happen is interesting. I don't understand why. I'm not trying to slow the game down more. So, like, let's put a time limit on how long it takes to review plays and challenges. But like, if you successfully challenge a call, why do you lose your challenge?
Yeah.
Why? Like, shouldn't you still have it?
I'll compromise. Here's the thing. I think that, the reason you lose it is because, you might have like 5 or 6 challenges if a coach gets hot on the challenges, and then but to mitigate that, my rule change I'd like to see is fewer timeouts. Teams get 7. And it's like, this is the oldest complaint ever, is that the last 20 seconds of a basketball game can take like 20 minutes because both sides are calling timeouts just to advance the ball or to just stop the clock so we can get an offense-defense sub. Like, I hate that. It totally ruins the flow of the game. It takes a lot of the spontaneity out of it. You see some coaches that instead of calling a timeout for a last-second shot after a made basket, they'll just let the guys run up. And like, that's how you get Steph Curry hitting it from half court in OKC to win the game in game 6 of the 2016 conference. Like, you get amazing plays, and sometimes you get better shots with just the free flowing, approach instead of let's draw something up. I just think we need maybe 1 or 2 timeouts per half. And if you want to save those for the last, 2 minutes, great. If not, we don't need 7 timeouts per team, plus replay, plus TV timeouts, plus, like, I don't know, you're going to get an infectious disease control timeout once a game. It's just like, it's too much. I'd like to be able to watch an NBA game without skipping free throws, like when you're trying to really bank a few games in a night, in like under 2. It's got to be under 2 hours. Give me 90 minutes. Like, let's move it along. Let's let the action
90 minutes. That's like, that's shaving an hour off the game at this point.
I think, you know what, we should let's have 6-minute quarter. No. So the other thing, the carrying and the travel stuff, for sure been a point of emphasis. I hope this goes one of two ways, because what always happens with stuff like this is this usually happens at the very beginning of a season. Referees will have points of emphasis and they will enforce the shit out of them for like 2 weeks or a month, and then you never hear from it again. Like delay of games on like touching the ball after a made basket 2 years ago, just every single time we were getting delay a game on the defensive team, and then it just stopped. It's still like you're not supposed to touch it, but now if you catch it and kind of throw it to the ref or the other team, they don't whistle you for that. So for the carrying stuff, either keep it at this standard where we're calling it like justifiably, because there are a ton of carries now in everybody's bag. Keep it like this, or just go back to how it was before. But like the selective enforcement and the we're going to do it for a month and then like Jordan Poole will be allowed to carry all the time again starting in January, like that's not good for anybody, because I think you just need either call it or don't, and let's just keep it consistent, because I don't like the idea that we're going to remember November as the month where the NBA called 500 carries and then they didn't call 100 the rest of the year. That I don't want.
My conspiracy is the NBA was too worried about like offenses becoming just so thermonuclear.
Well, what do you do? Like, 'cause I think that's legitimate, because you can't touch anybody anymore too. That's like that
and the average offensive rating right now would exceed what it was last year. I think I'd have to go back and look. Actually, it was 113 last year. I don't know what it is off the top of my head this year. I'll have to look at that really quickly. But I think you're right on the point of emphasis. There's stuff like this every single year, it feels like. And if I had to guess, because they would be worried about slowing down the pace of the game. It's 112.9 this year. So mission accomplished, down from 113. I think that it's not going to be like as big of a point of emphasis. When I was thinking about this question, I was like, well, are they trying to like limit the number of these like charges that players are going to try and draw by stepping in on? Like, I don't really know if there's any rhyme or reason though to why you would enforce travels and carries more often than not. So let's see if this sticks in like January or February. The other thing I would like to see changed, ban the last 2-minute report, because like the transparency, the notion, I get it, but like it's also not hard to review those things in real time. It's like, let's speed up the process and implement the last 2-minute report in real time as it's happening, so that, let's say, I think Kings fans have been the ones that feel like they're the ones that they've been jilted the most this year, so that the Kings aren't losing games or that these games aren't ending on calls that they deem to miss. It's not hard to review like those. Like you don't need the refs like to get on, stare at the screen for like 80 minutes. Like you have Secaucus, New Jersey. Like you can speed up that entire process while also expanding it, I feel like.
You'd think. The last thing is, I really thought that the James Harden like double, triple step back thing was just not going to be allowed. I thought there would be a point of emphasis on that, and it just hasn't really happened. I'm still not convinced that that's not a travel. And like, again, watching a lot of Steph Curry, like, man, he gets away with a lot of like, that was really 3.5 steps, and they're just quick little shuffles before he's fully caught it. And there's just like you know what it is? All it is that type of play just kind of looks wrong to me. Like it looks like you shouldn't be able to do that. And maybe it's because my eyes are getting slow, but it started with like the late gather and guys like LeBron and Harden really weaponizing that to get essentially 3 steps. Giannis does it. And I guess that's just okay now. Which is fine, because again, it's like, let's juice the offense, because fans like offense and we're selling a product, so they should like the product.
Right.
But the double, triple step back thing is it just rubs me the wrong way sometimes.
But you did that one, so let's move on to. Oh wow, okay. I'm skipping one. Some of these questions might be a little bit spicy, but Glad also asked, which trade was worse now that it has been a few years? The Lakers trade for AD or the Clippers trade for PG? The Clippers gave up Shea and 5 first-round picks. We all know the trades, but the Clippers gave up 5 first-round picks, 4 unprotected, 1 protected, along with 2 pick swaps, and haven't even gone to the finals. The Lakers gave up Brandon Ingram, Lonzo, and Josh Hart, the number 4 pick in 2019, unprotected 22 and 24 first, and unprotected swaps in 23, 25, 3 first and 2 swaps, all unprotected. The Lakers won a title, but have really screwed themselves with the lack of assets and poor roster construction they have now. If we wanted a grand scheme of things questions, is it worth mortgaging the future for a single championship?
So this is a floor or ceiling question, because the easy answer is, well, the Clippers trade is worse because the Lakers trade netted a title, and anything it's worth it. And that's the zooming out question, is like, is there anything you shouldn't do if it results in a title? And I think a lot of executives would say whatever it takes, because it's so hard to do it. Only one team does it every year. If you can win a title, you should do whatever you possibly can, especially going back to the last a couple questions ago. Like, you're not going to be a coach or a GM or a head executive of a team for 20 years or 15 or 10, even in most cases. Like, you might get 3 to 7 years, maybe a little more. And if you can win a title in that window, who cares if your predecessor doesn't have any draft picks left? Like, that's how I think it makes sense for executives to operate. At the same time, the Lakers' floor now, because of that trade, is like real scary, because you're looking at the swap this year that might net the Pelicans another really lucrative pick. You got no assets. You can't give up anything because you only have 2 firsts you can trade to get off a bad contract and Russell Westbrook. Like, it's going to get ugly. The Clippers, they've got like 8 guys you could trade for a protected first or maybe something better than that. They've been good. They still might, in the next year or two, reach their ceiling. Their floor is like, they're not going to bottom out. They're going to be okay. What that doesn't necessarily relate to the trade. It's more about how the rosters were managed, like after the trades, with the Lakers just blowing every offseason. So I think probably I have to still say that the Clippers trade is worse. Losing SGA, that's tough, because you could make the case that he would be a better piece to have than either Kawhi or Paul George right now, potentially. But the Lakers won a title. So, like, I just have to keep it simple and go that way.
If you have to pick one, is it worth mortgaging everything for a title? And I think the answer is yes. And the Lakers are only so fucked up now because of decisions they have made after the fact, which I think is kind of colors that. But I will say, and this was pointed out in Discord and it's been pointed out many times, we've discussed it, that Paul George trade was also about getting Kawhi Leonard.
Right.
And so, like, the best way I ever saw it phrased was that Sam Presti found a way to trade both Kawhi and Paul George without ever having Kawhi on the Thunder.
Yeah.
And so I think that gave the Thunder a unique form of leverage. And also, just like, it's not over yet it's over for the Lakers. And I think, like, there's a finality there. It's not, we don't know what's going on with Kawhi fully long-term with the Clippers. It's not over yet for them. And so this is like kind of a compound answer, but I would give a definitive, if I'm the Lakers, would I do it all over again? I absolutely would, because I don't care what you say about the bubble title. It resulted in another banner.
Yep. Yeah. Keeps it easy. I'm glad you're answering this one first. This is from Nugs. Would you rather have Bruce Brown or MPJ if you have to make the choice?
For the Nuggets team, Michael Porter Jr. is less mission critical to them than Bruce Brown. That is just, it's in a vacuum. Like, the health concerns with Michael Porter Jr. too, he's dealing with some heel stuff at the moment. And it was clearly bothering him before that. I think they just said it was building up, and he went from shooting like 1,000,000,000,000% from 3 to like a negative 1,000,000,000%. So clearly something was bothering him. But like, you could actually run. Like, I don't know that you don't want him setting up like live dribble possessions, but you can run the offense through Bruce Brown. He is like, he's hit some like really nice runners and floaters this year. He can be used as a screener. He's hit his threes for the most part. There's these ultra wide open threes. When you look at the Nuggets, having Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, Bones Hyland, even this version of Aaron Gordon, like, holy shit. Bruce Brown is more important than the Nuggets winning a title this year than Michael Porter Jr. And I don't think that's spicy. Now, in a vacuum, would I rather have Michael Porter Jr. and Bruce Brown? The idea of Michael Porter Jr. easily, but given his availability, the fact that we haven't seen, and this might be just a function of the roster, but like, we don't really know what he is as a self-creator, let alone a table setter for others. There's been some tantalizing defense too, like from a help perspective, when you look at the plays that he can make coming over around the basket. But if you're trying to win a title this season and you have Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, I think like Bruce Brown might be my answer here.
I hate this question. I think the best version of Porter is a guy that is going to score 30 a game and make like 40 something percent of a ridiculous volume of threes. But I also think that version probably doesn't exist on this Nuggets team. Like, he might be someone that on a worse team could just go get, like, if he's on the Wizards instead of Beal, for example, or something like that, or on the I don't know, the Bulls instead of Zach LaVine, and he gets like that level of usage, that many shots, I think like that's a really valuable player. But then you've got the cost, you've got the injury history, you've got the current injury. And really, I guess I have to come around and agree with you that if this is Bruce Brown, like for real, like that's going to get you double figure scoring, 5 and 5, make his threes, defend multiple positions, be usable like on the ball in a pick
Like
and
a
roll,
hub. Like
off the ball, be the roller, like that's still in the bag, from his Nets days. Yeah, man. Because again, let's go back to the same theme. Like, I don't see Bruce Brown getting played off the floor in a final series.
I was about to ask you that though. Is it more likely that Bruce Brown gets played on the floor or Michael Porter Jr.? Because Bruce Brown's playoff offense is just something that's sort of like the Nets have not made. Maybe I'm just like blanking on the 2020 playoff run, but like they haven't made like this super deep playoff push with Bruce Brown as mission. So there is like questions on how his offense to me might hold up in the postseason.
That's the thing. I think he's better now than he's ever been. So it's like, is this for real? I think this is his age 26 season. So like, yeah, maybe this is just
Bruce Brown is only 26.
he's peaking.
Wow.
Well, now you're gonna make me check that. I'm pretty
I'll
sure
check
that's
it. But if you're right, he might be a future all. I'm just kidding about the All-Star.
So yeah, I guess my
you're
risk
right.
my
Wow.
risk aversion says MPJ, the ceiling's really high. Boy, I've talked a lot about floors and ceilings, but like his ceiling is high, but is he going to reach it because of health and because of role and because of team context? Where if Bruce Brown could just do this, I mean, he's already playing slightly more minutes per game than MPJ. Like, I mean, that's why I hate this question. I feel like this is one we're going to look back on when Porter Jr.'s made like 6 All-Star games and feel stupid, but
I freaking love this question. Actually, I do think it's probably a tougher question to answer from the Nuggets perspective than a lot of other teams who I do feel would still fall to. And the contract was a good point, by the way, because it's not just the investment you have in MPJ, but how cheap Bruce Brown Jr.
right.
is at
That's
the
the
moment.
other thing. Let's see. I'll throw you this one. This is from Bondum34. Assuming Jokic and Embiid are all NBA centers and Anthony Davis makes second team or first as a forward, who's the third team center? So basically, who is the third best center in the league right now after Jokic and Embiid?
So I'm going by the play-by-play data here. The answer is Pascal Siakam.
Oh, that's such a cheating answer. I
He's
hate
been,
that you picked that.
he's been better than everybody else, but I would say it has to be Bam after that. No, I mean it has the Rudy Gobert town stuff. Gobert's been fine, but they're trying to do more stuff with him offensively, and it doesn't really always look great. He's been able to prop up their defense a lot of the times for minutes. They've actually climbed the ranks. If you looked at where they are in defense lately, they're actually were they second or something? Like
they're great when he's on the floor. Like
right. And they're oh no, I was looking at just on the floor, but yeah, they're down to 14th in defensive efficiency. So excuse me, I don't know why I thought they were second. But yeah, is it like who else is in that conversation?
So just like estimated plus minus and some other stuff. I think Brook Lopez is someone that's going to have a case, especially with all the defensive player of the year buzz that he's getting, and he's on a great team, and everyone on that team won't shut up about how integral he is.
Saying Siakam he's been the five.
Siakam's not really a center. That's no. If you're asking me who I'd want, I think like the logical answer is Bam. Even though like a lot of the advanced numbers don't like him, I just think it's like if you had to just pick someone, it's got to be Bam. But Lopez has a case. I mean, like everyone in Sacramento is going to say, "Oh, Sabonis is like 18, 11, and 6, and the Kings' offense is great." Like, miss me with the Sabonis stuff.
Whoa, that felt like an unnecessary stray. I said, like, you don't have to insult him while not calling him the third best center in the league right now.
I mentioned, but look, so that you mentioned Gobert, I think, so I touch the other side of the opposite of someone catching a stray. I think Jared Allen, if he gets healthy and is playing, is probably someone you're going to want to think about.
Those minutes get ratcheted up. Is it him?
No, I think for me it's somewhere between Lopez and Adebayo, but I'd lean Adebayo. Gobert would have been a pretty easy answer like most years before this one, just if you're looking at like defensive impact and all this other stuff. But I think I don't think we're there yet this year. If that happens,
I'm going to leapfrog to a question because I think this question was made for you, and it comes from Tybal Wingspan. been thinking about the Dubs and how the defense had been what puts them over the top, only carrying about 16 playoff wins. For Klay during 2015 to 2019, where would you have put him on a list of the top 10 total defensive value of all players for that 5-year stretch, not including centers? And for whatever your answer is, what percent of that defender do you think is reasonable to expect from current Klay?
So Klay is one of the hardest defensive players to evaluate because none of the numbers have ever liked him. Like you just have, it's basically a watch the games argument, which always sucks because it makes it seem like
I
you're
don't want
just
to do
really
that. First of
subject to
all,
the bias of everything. But so, just for example, like he's never ever had consistently been a high steals guy. Like just doesn't get steals. He's never once had a positive defensive box plus minus, which is really fucking hard to do when you're on a lot of defenses that are top 5 and sometimes number 1. I mean, that filters out for who you're out there with, but like the numbers just don't. The numbers say he's a bad defender, which isn't the case. I think the way you make the case for him so he's not like a top 10 defensive player at any stretch, I don't think, of the years in question of like 15 to 19, just objectively. In terms of like his value to the specific situation he was in, like that's where you make the argument that he's really vital because for years and years, he would guard Tony Parker when the Warriors were always trying to beat the Spurs, right? And Steph couldn't do that or wouldn't do that, wasn't asked to do that. And then against the Cavs, it was really common to see him stand up Kevin Love in the post. So he was kind of the guy, like Draymond puts out all the fires on that defense, especially when they were really great. But Klay was kind of second in that effort. Andrew Bogut deserves credit too, especially early on. But Klay could be asked to defend 4 positions and do it pretty well, unspectacularly, but he would cover for guys that couldn't guard the positions that they should have been able to or would normally have been asked to. And he also was just solid, like just was where he was supposed to be, wouldn't make a ton of mistakes. But like, I think probably if anyone's even thinking about him as a top 10 defender at any stretch from 15 to 19, like, I don't think I can't get there.
independent of big men too.
Yeah, no, I think
Okay.
even if maybe if you're just talking wings, even that's just like you can't lean on the numbers because was a bad defender statistically. I
Here's
think
the
I think
here's the I was gonna say
go
the
ahead.
thing with that is just like you laid all this out, like being able to tell him to just go guard the point of attack. His defensive metrics would be better if he grabbed rebounds, which was just that was not a focus of his because he was
Right.
spending so much time in these tough perimeter covers. And when you're having those tough perimeter covers, it's almost harder to get steals because all of your steals have to come like outside the passing lane, then like you're not stumbling into loose balls.
Mhm.
And so I actually think that this wasn't the Avery Bradley paradox. I actually
No.
think that Klay Thompson was underrated defensively. Now, top 10 during that time, I don't know. But
Yeah.
I almost felt like you were just telling him short there, like in terms of
Well,
perimeter defenders.
here's what I'd say. I'd say I think the best way to measure like the real value of a player is can he be an important piece of a team that is playing at like a really high level? And against different types of teams that are going to try to go at you with mismatches of either smaller guys or bigger guys. And he did everything that was asked of him. And so I think that's really valuable because there's just a lot of guys that, that are probably better physical defenders than him that just wouldn't do that, that would like, I'm just going to guard a wing. I'm not chasing, like Tony Parker at his peak was like, there aren't a lot of guys that are harder to stay with in a half court set when Tim Duncan is setting a screen. It's just like, that's a hell of a job. And he spared Curry from that. And like, that's valuable. That's a specific example, but it's illustrative of like what he did. So I don't know how to rank that. I know that the Warriors defense would not have been nearly as good without him. But I just like, how do you rank a guy in the top 10 of some it's hard. I don't know. It's so context dependent. I definitely never remember thinking to kind of tie into the second part of this question, oh man, he got burned there. Or like he that's maybe not a matchup for him. I don't remember thinking that even when he's guarding ones and fours. This year, I think he's maybe 70% of like what he was before. And there are nights where it's like, I don't know what the percentage is. It's just like half because he just can't. He's had nights where, and like, yeah, if I tore my Achilles and my ACL, like I would be having a hard time staying in front of the best athletes in the world. But he's definitely not that same guy now. I think the main thing is he's moved up the positional spectrum where now it's like some threes are too quick, fours are like it's better if he gets to use his strength and his lateral mobility because it's not there. I do think he can still be part of a really good defense. And I think the Warriors have been better and will be better on that end of the floor. There's a long way to go for them to be back to where they were, especially at the beginning of last year. But he's not going to be that guy. He's not going to be someone you could throw out there on anyone but a center and feel like we don't need to worry about that. Those days are that I don't think we're that. That's what Andrew Wiggins is for. They've got the guy that can do
which he's ever more valuable defensively again than Andrew Wiggins.
Never. No. I mean, Wiggins is a great defensive player. Like just,
I've been saying that in 2019.
Right? Right? Like the fact of that where Wiggins is today is what keeps me from like giving up on almost anybody in their first like handful of seasons on a bad team. Just because you never would like Wiggins as like the perfect 3-and-D role player that can get you a bucket when you need it, but doesn't shoot that much. Like that was just unfathomable in the early years of Wiggins.
Can I ask you this question about Draymond Green too? Just because
I was hoping you would, because this is a really fun question.
Glad asked, if you were an NBA GM, what is the highest draft pick you would use on a player that would be guaranteed to have Draymond Green's career? To clarify, I don't mean the titles are guaranteed, but like essentially all the things Dre brings to the table as a player: rebounding, passing, leadership until he punch pool, energy, knowing he will essentially be an all NBA defender for 7+ years, DPOY, etc. So what's the highest pick you would use? Glass said he would definitely use a lottery pick, but he wasn't sure if he could use a top 5. They could use a top 5 pick on him.
So if we just put aside like all the questions we always have to ask about Draymond, would he do this if it weren't the Warriors and if he didn't have Steph Curry? We can put that aside and just look at the drafts around him. So I'm going top 5 minimum. And that's just based on, I just looked, I scanned the drafts. He's starting from 2010 to 2015. He was picked in 2012. He came off the board 35th. So in 2010, I think the only guy you take over him is Paul George, that I'd even have a discussion about. 2011, you take Kawhi over him. You probably take Jimmy Butler. You probably take Kyrie, and then Klay, I think, is someone you probably take Draymond over, but that's where we are. So that's 4 guys. 2012, you take Anthony Davis, you take Damian Lillard, Brad Beal, Chris Middleton, debatable. Next year, Giannis for sure. Rudy Gobert is a really interesting one. I think I'd take Draymond over Gobert, but that's it. 2014, Embiid and Jokic, that's it. 2015, Booker, and then it's like Towns and Porzingis, probably not. So like you're top 5 for all those. And that's, a couple years before and several after. I think Draymond has had a better career than a lot of those guys. And has certainly won more than all of them. So I don't know. I mean, it's a top 5 for me. You can't take him first because he can't be the best player on your team. Mm-hmm. But other than that, like, I don't know what you're hoping to get out of the draft. Everybody wants the 30 points per game first option scorer, but other than that, I don't know what you'd prioritize more than a guy that could be the anchor of a playoff defense, for 10 years. That's tough to top.
I think top 5 would be pretty easy. Does it get like difficult for you when you're talking top 3 or, top 1? Like if you're guaranteed that, because Draymond is like the engine of your entire team. It's really just the offensive question is, what do you envision Draymond being offensively independent of the Warriors? And like I said, I'm with you. I would use a top 5 pick without even thinking on someone who's guaranteed to have Draymond Green's career.
I think Curry is a unique player, and I don't think it's realistic to say that Green would have developed the level of chemistry and for it to have been as effective as it's been with Curry with literally anyone else in the history of the sport. Like Curry is just the guy for him to play with. And I think Green would have figured out how to make some other star better. But it's just, it's sort of a lightning in a bottle situation that he got to come to the Warriors and play with Curry, because offensively, like you could throw him on one of those Rockets teams instead of PJ Tucker, right? With Harden. Like you're just not guarding him in the corner. So what's he doing? He's not playing pick and roll with Harden because they just wanted to ISO. So there's just there's all these uncertainties, but depending on the situation, like, yeah, you top 2 or 3, but top 5 is not a question for me at all.
I do wonder, I'd have to go and look back where I had him if I was still doing NBA 100 at that time. But 2015, 2016, like that Draymond Green, there was an argument of, is he a top 10 player? And like that was an actual, that singular year or 2 year stretch,
Yeah.
like, that was an actual question.
Well, that's the year he shot 38% from three.
Never happened again, but that's why I said yeah.
That's happened once. So that guy, yeah, that guy was a top 10 player, I think. But it just, you know, is he the most context dependent player? Like, not taking away, like, he would have been very good to great anywhere, I think, if he'd gotten an opportunity to play. But even like his skill set is so unusual. Like, where else is he going to get the agency and the use and the touches and all? Like, he's a really valuable offensive player, even though he's just not a shooter. Like, I don't know where else he gets that chance. Let's see. Do we have another one for you? Okay. I got one more, I think. Last one for you.
Darkwing Duck, right?
Darkwing Duck, my guy. This is Darkwing Duck coming with the tough ones.
Yeah, they're treating this like we had 40 hours to answer this.
You need to go call up Kevin Pelton and Seth Partnow for this one and give them like a full day to work on it. What is the biggest drop in a player's field goal percentage and 3-point percentage due to missed heaves over a season? Minimum, thanks for the filter, minimum 100 3-point attempts in the season. And do NBA players, part two, really, do NBA players really worry about it enough to be the reason they don't heave? Thank God you did a little bit of research on part one, but I do have a thought on part two. So the floor is yours, Seth Partnow.
Yeah, so I did try to actually find the answer to this question, but there's no way for me to if I got into like filtering, setting up a code for to filter it right into a spreadsheet, which I just don't have the time to do or to figure out how to do, but it wasn't available together where the total attempts versus so it would have just taken too much. It would have taken too much legwork for a mailbag question, in my opinion. These are supposed to be more not off the cuff. We do research for them, but I did look. Steph Curry owns the record, at least since Shot Finder, since 96, 97 on the number of heaves taken in a single season. In 2016, 2017, he took 15 heaves and he made only one. And so you're talking about okay, yes, it's 6.7%, which sounds just so bad, but you're 14 misses caked into his 3-point percentage that year. He was still over 41%. And so you're not looking at something that would meaningfully change his shot percentage. If you're wondering there's definitely some sort of wrong code here, by the way, for Basketball Reference, because Shot Finder, it's coming up that Kristaps, Denny Avdia, Kyle Kuzma, Will Barton have all hit multiple heaves this year, which is just not true. And that Kristaps, Denny, and Kuzma specifically are 3 of 5 on heaves for the season. So
get them up, guys. Get those heaves up.
I didn't include that, but the most recent person to hit multiple heaves in a season before this year, Marco Bellinelli in 2010, 2011, was 2 of 2 on heaves. I wanted to see, I was sorting by field goal percentage rate. Steph Curry hit multiple heaves in 2015, 2016. So did Vince Carter. But just randomly I found that interesting. 2010, 2011, Marco Bellinelli went 2 of 2 on heaves, apparently. The answer to the second part is they absolutely think about it. And you see it in real time develop. Some players really don't give a shit. And I think I understand why players would second guess, especially if you're a non-star. But we as podcasters, we as media members, fans, we're filtering out heaves now. Teams are smart enough to where if they come to you in a meeting and say, well, we're not going to give you 8.7 million. We're not going to give you the mid-level. We'll give you $1 million less because you only shot 38% from 3 last year. And if you filter out the 14 heaves that you missed, that brought it up to 39. They absolutely think about it. So I get it, but also we should be beyond the point. They're a separate form of data. And I would campaign for, to make it even more accessible or more obvious, because the fans shouldn't have to do the legwork on this, is when you're actually looking at a player's 3-point percentage, can the heaves just not be included? And then you get into then should the last second shot clock ones and the half court be included? I get that there's some complications there. I think in the half court, everything just needs to be fair. You had 24 seconds to figure out what the hell you were doing. You weren't under the actual limitations of, there's only 0.5 seconds left on the entire clock.
Yeah, I think you could just fix that by let's talk about the range. NBA.com sorts by you get your 25 to 29 feet, your 30 to 30, whatever. We just talk about that. And anytime it's over 40, or 50, we could just assume it's a heave and just not count it. players absolutely do hold the ball and like feign an attempt after the buzzer goes off or other things. But like whenever we talk about something like this, and this is the thing, we can filter it out, but contracts have incentives for certain 3-point percentages. And Mo Harkless, do you remember this? In 2017, had a $500,000 incentive if he made 35% of his threes, and he got to 35.1% and did not shoot a three in the last game of the season. Like purposely was avoiding, like stepping in. Like I think he was 5 of 6. Good for him. Get your money. But I'm just saying, like that's maybe something we want to look at a little more. Like, hey team, if he's at X%, let's like not incentivize him to take to change his shot profile down the stretch of the season. Like that's a little, I'm not cool with that. But yeah, like just watch literally any game. Like guys will just not heave it at the end of every quarter. It just doesn't happen. They always duck it, which like, I don't know. You care about your numbers, I guess.
I have this anecdote. Do you know who the leader on B-ball refs, shot finders is in career only since 96, 97? Who's made the most in the NBA during that almost 3-decade span? Heaves.
Andre Drummond.
No, I'm not where I thought you were going to go with that guess.
I mean, Steph's the obvious answer, but it's not him or you wouldn't be asking.
Tied for second with Jason Kidd and Dwayne Wade.
Oh, Dwayne Wade. You know what? I can picture Dwayne Wade always chucking it.
And just this season, apparently, Denny Avdia and Kyle Kuzma and Kristaps Porzingis have ambled their way into the top 10 all time. And
they're going to break records, these Wizards, this year.
Zach Randolph with 5.
Ooh.
Zach Randolph, 5 of 37 on heaves for a 13.5% clip. Some people would kill to shoot from the 3-point line. So if you're wondering who has the most attempts, I feel like you're not going to get it either. Steph Curry second.
Yeah, I was going to say Steph. I could picture him taking a lot of heaves because he expects to make them. Is the thing.
Good and you know what? I respect him a ton for that.
Yeah.
Andre Miller, 113 heaves. Steph Curry is in second with 86. And those two are just head and shoulders above. Like Steve Blake, third at 64. Ray Allen, fourth at 61. Jamal Crawford at 59. Ray Felton comes in the top 7. Good for Ray Felton. So,
oh man, good heave talk. I imagine Andre Miller doing a heave somehow right after he fakes a timeout and then drives to the basket and gets a free layup, which was his other thing he always did.
I was surprised that Jared Jack wasn't on here, but I guess just the meme wasn't indicative of his shot selection where he's hoisting it above the throws it over the hoop in that Knicks game.
That's right. Yeah, that's gonna go. That'll be remembered forever. As maybe that's why he shouldn't take heaves, or he should take them from farther. I think is probably. I think that's it. Unless you got anything else, I'll take us out. Thank you everybody for listening and for your questions too. I really like doing these mailbags. I think Dan feels the same. So engage with us. Get on Discord. I did it. Anyone can do it. Like, subscribe, download, rate us. Tell your friends. Word of mouth still matters. We really appreciate when anyone says anything nice about the pod on Twitter or anywhere else. It doesn't have to be on social media. Just, tell someone quietly. That's good too. Join the Discord. Last thing, I did it. Would love to talk to everybody on there, get some more questions, all that other stuff. In closing, even though I shouted him out and said a nice thing about him, I would like to apologize to Jared Allen. And on behalf of Dan, just want to celebrate the one and only greatest human alive that has ever lived and still can't get on the floor, but someday will, and justice will be served, Frank Ntilikina.